61. Samyutta Nikaya 12.19. The Discourse on the Fool and the Wise Person. The Buddha was staying in Sravasti. He said, "Monks, for the fool who is obscured by ignorance and bound by craving, this body comes into being in this way. Thus, there is this body and external name and form. These are two things. Dependent on these two, there is contact. There are 6 sense bases, and the fool experiences pleasure and pain through these 6 sense bases, or any one of them. Monks, for the wise person who is obscured by ignorance and bound by craving, this body also comes into being in this way. Thus, there is this body and external name and form. These are two things. Dependent on these two, there is contact. There are 6 sense bases, and the wise person experiences pleasure and pain through these 6 sense bases, or any one of them. In this case, monks, what is the difference between the wise person and the fool? What is the distinction? What is the disparity?" The monks replied, "Venerable Sir, our teachings are rooted in the Blessed One, guided by the Blessed One, have the Blessed One as their resort. It would be good if the Blessed One would explain the meaning of this statement. Having heard it from the Blessed One, the monks will remember it. Then monks, listen and attend closely. I will speak." "Yes, Venerable Sir," those monks replied. The Blessed One said this, "Monks, for the fool who is obscured by that ignorance and bound by that craving, this body has come into being. That ignorance has not been abandoned by the fool, and that craving has not been exhausted. Why is that? Because, monks, the fool has not lived the holy life for the complete ending of suffering. Therefore, when the body breaks up after death, the fool is reborn into another body. Being reborn into another body, he is not freed from birth, aging, death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. I say he is not freed from suffering. Monks, for the wise person who is obscured by that ignorance and bound by that craving, this body has come into being. But that ignorance has been abandoned by the wise person, and that craving has been exhausted. Why is that? Because, monks, the wise person has lived the holy life for the complete ending of suffering. Therefore, when the body breaks up after death, the wise person is not reborn into another body. Not being reborn into another body, he is freed from birth, aging, death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. I say he is freed from suffering. Monks, this is the difference between the wise person and the fool. This is the distinction. This is the disparity. That is to say, the living of the holy life. This is the 9th discourse. Note, for a detailed and vivid explanation of the 12 links of dependent origination, please refer to Samyutta Nikaya 12.1 and 12.2, which are not explained here again. This passage profoundly expounds the core Buddhist teaching on the distinction between wisdom and foolishness, containing rich philosophical thoughts and practical guidance. Let's analyze it layer by layer. 1. Common starting point. The Buddha first points out that both the fool and the wise person's bodies come into being due to ignorance and craving. This indicates the common origin and nature of human beings. 2. Similarity in sensory experiences. Both experience the external world through the 6 sense bases: eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind, and feel pleasure and pain. This shows that there is no difference between the wise and the fool in terms of superficial sensory experiences. 3. Key differences. The fool. Ignorance is not abandoned. Craving is not exhausted. Therefore, they will be reborn after death and continue to suffer in the cycle of rebirth. The wise. Through practice, they have abandoned ignorance and eliminated craving. Thus, they can escape the cycle of rebirth and be liberated from suffering. 4. Importance of practice. The Buddha emphasizes that the wise person surpasses the fool because they have correctly practiced the holy life. This highlights the crucial role of Buddhist practice in personal liberation. 5. Definition of liberation. The text clearly states that liberation means freedom from birth, aging, death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair, all forms of suffering. This passage provokes deep reflection. 1. The nature of human life. We are all born human, facing the same sensory world, but how we view and respond to this world determines our fate. 2. Difference between knowledge and wisdom. Merely possessing knowledge is not enough to be considered wise. True wisdom lies in seeing through phenomena to essence and putting it into practice, ultimately achieving liberation. 3. Meaning of practice. Buddhism emphasizes that practice is not for gaining supernatural powers, but for eliminating ignorance and craving, thereby gaining true freedom. 4. Goal of life. From a Buddhist perspective, the ultimate goal of life is not to pursue worldly success or happiness, but to completely liberate oneself from the suffering of rebirth. 5. Personal responsibility. Everyone has the potential to become wise. The key is whether one is willing to face their own ignorance and craving and strive to practice. 6. Importance of the present. Although the text discusses the state after death, it actually emphasizes the importance of present practice. Our choices and actions now will determine our future. This passage is not just a philosophical discourse, but more of a practical guide. It inspires us to reflect on our way of life, examine our desires and ignorance, and encourages us to embark on the path of practice. It reminds us that true wisdom lies not in external achievements, but in inner awakening and liberation. In this world full of suffering and change, such wisdom is undoubtedly the most precious wealth.